This is why Ekko won't be picked at Worlds 2025. This is exactly why Ekko probably won't be seeing much action or getting picked at all during Worlds 2025. You know, in professional League of Legends, champion viability can shift dramatically based on the meta. And Ekko just seems to be falling short in the past few years, since he hasn't been picked in competitive play in years. So today I'll be taking a closer look and reviewing his strengths and weaknesses in detail. So let's quickly start by touching on strengths that Ekko does bring to the table. First of all, one of his standout features is that he has an incredibly strong clear speed, which is impressive when it comes to how fast he can handle waves or camps. This shines through both in mid lane as well as in jungle, especially compared to other current popular junglers or mid laners that we've been seeing at Worlds, like Jarvan or Galio. Those champions are solid, but Ekko can outpace them easily in clearing once he gets going. And let me tell you, especially once you hit your first item, you can just run through all of your camps very quickly and effortlessly. It's almost like he's on autopilot at that point, which in turn allows you to spend way more time on other aspects of the game, like preparing for major objectives like Drake or Herald, or even setting up ganks and vision. And this kind of efficiency is especially valuable in pro play, where every second counts and teams are always looking to maximize the pressure on the map. However, this clear speed alone is just not enough to compensate for his weak early game that other junglers and mid laners bring to the table with their more aggressive kits. Moving on to the next big strength, we got his snowballing potential, which is honestly one of the most exciting parts of playing Ekko. He does in fact have one of the highest snowballing potentials in the entire game. If you can somehow navigate through his relatively weak early game and even manage to establish a lead, you can pretty much elite anyone on the map. Even if you happen to make a mistake, you can just ult at any time, which minimizes consequences even if you go for risky plays. Of course, there's other minor advantages that Ekko has, like him being surprisingly strong when he's the only AP carry in the team comp, but there's just as many downsides to picking Ekko in pro play. So let's get into it. We already mentioned his weak early game, but let's expand on that because it's a major disadvantage. Ekko simply doesn't have the best skirmishing prowess, due to him not having a lot of reliable crowd control in his kit, and his damage is mostly item dependent. Unlike current meta picks that dominate the meta, who can just jump in and fight early, Ekko does need to scale up a bit first, which can leave him vulnerable in those early skirmishes. A big part of what makes his CC weak is that it's unreliable, since both forms of his crowd control are skill shots that require precise aiming, and especially his W ability is very difficult to land consistently. While it is very rewarding to hit that massive 2.25 second AoE stun, it's much harder to pull off against pro players who are trained in dodging skill shots and just have better mechanics, positioning, and awareness. So landing your W is just not a reliable strategy. Next up, his ganking ability is not the greatest either, and this ties into some issues with his playstyle because you do want to be ganking a lot on Ekko. We all know that ganking is difficult when your enemies have vision on you and spot your gank approach. But it's much harder to secure that vision control in pro play, where wards are placed efficiently and teams coordinate vision control much better. And that's definitely what you need to hit Ekko's W effectively, since you do have to charge it up as well in advance, and you don't want to show yourself early so that they don't know that your stun is coming. And without that element of surprise, his ganks can be very weak, leading to wasted time or even counter ganks that put him even further behind. Another point to consider is the snowballing risk, which essentially is the opposite of a snowballing potential. If you don't manage to get a lead, which is already much harder in pro play, or even worse if you fall behind early on, you're prone to being invaded constantly and tend to become very useless in the game. Especially in pro play when supports roam aggressively with their jungler to apply pressure, Ekko can get snowballed against very hard. As we mentioned, he's very resource dependent, needing gold and XP to shine, and he just can't really do much without them, turning him more into a liability for his team if he falls behind. On top of that, he's very susceptible to crowd control himself, which can be a nightmare in teamfights. With current meta picks like Alistar or Nautilus, who have forms of CC that you can't reduce with tenacity, it's very easy to chain CC Ekko and lock him down so that he doesn't get to use his ult or deal any meaningful damage. In coordinated pro play, this happens even more often than in solo queue, because teams can communicate perfectly to focus him out, which makes it incredibly difficult for Ekko to pop off or even contribute to fights in any significant way. We also need to mention team compositions and how they play into this, because the meta is everything in competitive. The current meta just simply favors AD junglers with their damage and engage, as well as ranged mages in the mid lane for safe poke and wave clear. And for formats like best of ones and best of threes, there are more than enough power picks in both roles, even with Fearless Draft. If AP junglers do get picked, then it's usually in the later games like game 4 or 5, where teams pull out surprise picks much more often. And for mid lane, there's even more power picks out there, from reliable ranged mages to other assassins who are just stronger, more consistent, and more reliable than Ekko. Lastly, Ekko's high skill ceiling makes him tough for pro players to fully master, as his kit demands mechanical accuracy, precise timing, and also decision making under pressure, which is essential in pro play. It's not just about landing abilities, it's about knowing when to commit, when to ult, when to use W, how to use W, and how to position yourself, since you are an assassin after all. Ekko is especially tough to master with limited practice time that pros have, as they often focus on team strategies and meta picks first, rather than off-meta picks. This naturally lowers his presence in pro play, as teams opt for safer picks that they can execute better. So all in all, while Ekko has his moments, he's much stronger in solo queue at the moment, and a very unlikely pick for Worlds 2025. I personally would be very excited if he gets picked at Worlds, but I don't think so.